Look, immigration is complex. Throughout history, people have moved for opportunity, love, fleeing giant dung beetles, you name it. But lately things have felt particularly prickly. With more people on the move than ever, some countries are putting up walls, both literally and figuratively. Before you stay home and argue with strangers on Twitter, let's unpack this a bit. So, first up, Denmark, land of Vikings, pastries and increasingly strict immigration policies. Denmark has always prided itself on its culture, but recently there's been a growing concern about preserving a uniquely Danish identity. The concern is that large numbers of immigrants might dilute that culture. It's a familiar refrain, the fear of the other changing society. Denmark's response? Tighten the screws. Stricter requirements for family reunification, tougher language tests, and limitations on welfare benefits. The message, assimilate or consider moving elsewhere. Denmark isn't alone in this. Across Europe, we're seeing a rise in nationalist sentiment and stricter immigration policies. Is it a knee-jerk reaction to complex global issues? Absolutely. Next up, Australia, land of sunshine, shrimp on the barbie, and beautiful beaches, but also a land with complicated feelings about who gets to enjoy those shrimps and the sun. Australia has always had strict immigration policies, particularly for asylum seekers and refugees. The Operation Sovereign Borders policy is essentially a big do not enter sign for anyone trying to reach Australia by boat. The Australian Navy intercepts these boats and turns them back, often in dangerous conditions. The justification? Deterring people smuggling and protecting borders from illegal entry. But the optics are about as appealing as a venomous spider in your bathers, causing public outcry. Australia even sends asylum seekers to offshore detention centres in places like Nauru and Papua New Guinea, far from the mainland. These centres have been widely criticised for their conditions, with reports of abuse, neglect and poor living standards. Australia argues that their tough stance works, saving lives by deterring dangerous sea voyages and preventing drownings. Critics argue it's simply cruel and inhumane, avoiding international obligations to refugees and human rights. Okay, let's talk about Hungary, a country with a rich history and vibrant culture. Known for its stunning architecture, delicious goulash, and a leader who's not exactly known for his warm embrace of immigrants. Viktor Orbán, Hungary's Prime Minister, sees immigration as a threat to national identity. Not just to Hungarian culture, but to Western civilization itself. Orbán's rhetoric is inflammatory and divisive. He's called refugees Muslim invaders and warned of a Muslim takeover of Europe, stoking fear and resentment. Hungary's actions have been just as extreme and controversial. They built a razor-wire fence along their border with Serbia to keep out asylum seekers, a stark symbol of exclusion. Hungary has also made it incredibly difficult for refugees to claim asylum, introducing laws that make it nearly impossible for them to stay legally, creating a hostile environment. They've even criminalized helping asylum seekers, targeting NGOs and individuals who offer aid, further isolating those in need. It's a chilling example of how fear and xenophobia can erode human rights and compassion, and shut the door on those most in need, leaving them in a state of uncertainty and despair. Chapter 4. Poland, where solidarity seems to have its limits. Poland has a long and complicated history with immigration. Recently, the country has taken a harsh turn, particularly with refugees. Poland has seen a rise in nationalist sentiment, fueled by fears of cultural change and economic insecurity. These fears have manifested in increasingly restrictive immigration policies. Poland has been particularly resistant to accepting refugees, especially from Muslim-majority countries. Remember the crisis on the border of Belarus in 2021? Thousands of migrants were stranded in freezing conditions. Poland's response? Build a wall and deploy troops to the border. The Polish government argues it's protecting its borders and citizens. Critics say it's a betrayal of the country's history of seeking refuge and a shameful abdication of humanitarian obligations. Chapter 5. Sweden from open arms to closed doors. Sweden, once synonymous with open borders, has shifted. The influx of refugees during the 2015 crisis strained resources and led to social tensions. Coupled with the rise of the far-right Sweden Democrats Party, the government has tightened its stance on immigration. Sweden has introduced border controls, made it more difficult for refugees to obtain permanent residency, and implemented a controversial law separating families seeking asylum. Sweden still accepts refugees, but the numbers have dropped significantly. The debate over immigration continues, with some arguing the country has lost its humanitarian way. Chapter 6. The United States, a nation built by immigrants, now building walls. America, the land of the free, has a bit of an identity crisis when it comes to immigration. This nation, often celebrated for its diversity and opportunity, grapples with its own contradictions. It's a tale as old as the nation itself. A country built by immigrants that can't seem to agree on whether to keep letting them in. The debate over who gets to be an American is as old as America itself. From the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 to the Muslim ban of 2017, the US has a long and complicated history of both welcoming and rejecting immigrants. Each era brings its own set of challenges and prejudices. The Trump era, with its rhetoric of walls and bans, brought anti-immigrant sentiment to the forefront of American politics. The idea of building physical and metaphorical walls became a central theme. While the Biden administration has reversed some of those policies, the issue of immigration remains deeply divisive. The pendulum swings, but the core issues persist. The southern border has become a political flashpoint, with debates raging over how to handle the influx of migrants seeking asylum. The humanitarian crisis at the border is a test of America's values. The situation is complex, with no easy answers. Each policy decision impacts countless lives, both within and outside the borders. America's soul is at stake in how it chooses to treat those seeking refuge within its borders. The choices made today will shape the nation's future and its identity. Across the pond, the United Kingdom is grappling with its own immigration conundrum. Brexit, the UK's decision to leave the European Union, was fueled in part by concerns over immigration. The Leave campaign played on fears of uncontrolled immigration, promising to take back control of the UK's borders. Now, with Brexit a reality, the UK is free to set its own immigration policies. The government has introduced a points-based system, prioritising skilled workers and those who speak English. Critics argue the system is too bureaucratic and will create labour shortages in key industries. Let's shift gears and head to Japan. Japan is known for its unique culture, technological prowess and homogeneity. The country has long had strict immigration policies aiming to preserve its cultural identity. But Japan is facing a demographic challenge, a shrinking and aging population. This demographic shift has led to labour shortages and concerns about economic stagnation. The government has taken steps to ease restrictions, creating new visa categories for skilled workers and students. But Japan still faces a cultural hurdle, overcoming its deep-seated aversion to large-scale immigration. Next door to Japan, South Korea is another economic powerhouse grappling with immigration. Like Japan, South Korea has traditionally been a homogeneous society with strict immigration controls, but as South Korea's economy has grown, so too has its need for labour. The country is facing a shortage of workers, particularly in low-wage industries such as manufacturing and agriculture. This has led to an increase in undocumented migration, with many workers from Southeast Asia coming to South Korea in search of better opportunities. The South Korean government is caught between the need for workers and the public's anxieties about immigration. So, there you have it, a glimpse into the complex and often contradictory world of immigration policies. From Denmark's cultural concerns to Australia's border security measures, the issue of immigration is fraught with challenges. Each country has its own unique history, culture and circumstances that shape its approach. Immigration is a global phenomenon that's here to stay. Look, I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers here. Immigration is messy, it's emotional, it's about real people's lives. But we can't let fear and xenophobia dictate our policies. We need honest conversations about immigration, balancing security with compassion. Behind every statistic, there's a human being with hopes, dreams, and the right to a dignified life.